we're now ready to include some additional formatting using Bootstrap CSS classes. In the instruction sheet, this will include steps 17 through steps 19. In step 17, it says to add the image rounded and image responsive classes to our HTML image element for the Mirac logo. I want to come back over here to the W3 Schools website just to show you an example of how you can use a reference like the W3 Schools website and any other website that provides a reference to Bootstrap. In step 17, it mentioned adding the rounded edges to images. So I can just come over here in my list of options in the Bootstrap tutorial and click on Bootstrap Images. It will then show me some examples of what the result will be if you apply some of these classes to your HTML image element. So the instructions said to add the rounded corners. So here is an example of what a rounded corner will look like. You can see that you add it by including the class image rounded. If I switch back over to the instructions, we also want to add the control label class for the HTML labels and form control class to the drop-down list and text box server controls. Then going on down to the future value label, include the text info. And for the buttons, we want to include the button class and the button primary class to both of our buttons. So again, just another example of how you can use the reference with W3 Schools or any other Bootstrap reference is to go ahead and, for example, in reference to the buttons, if I click on the Bootstrap buttons, the instructions said to include the primary class for the button, and so it shows us what a primary class will do, what it will look like. And we can see that we're going to have a blue button with a white forecolor on the button. So that's what the BTN primary looks like. Also, if I come down here to, for example, the forms, we looked at the forms earlier when we applied the form horizontal class. But if I keep scrolling down, you can see that there's also classes for a control label that can be put on our label HTML elements, and we also have form controls as well. So let's go ahead and add these classes that it mentions in steps 17 through 19, and also step 19 says to add the text danger class to the validation controls. So let's add those classes as we continue to work on the formatting of our future value web form. Before I start making changes to the formatting on the labels, the validation, and the buttons, I'm going to make sure that I have all of the inline formatting removed. So I know that on my validation I have the forecolor as red. I'm going to want to go through and remove that. And also on the future value label, the font is bold. So I want to come over to the source, and before I start changing the formatting of my controls by using the Bootstrap classes, I want to remove all the other formatting. So I know on my label I have bold, so I want to remove that. Then on my validators, I have the forecolor of red. I want to remove that attribute. It's another forecolor equals red. So both of my validators for the years now have the red forecolor removed. And I want to do the same thing for the validators for my interest rate. So in code, I'm just going to delete the attribute for the forecolor equals red on both the required field and the range validator. Then go back over to design and you'll see that the label is no longer bold and our validators no longer are red. So now we're ready to add the classes from the instructions, from the instruction sheet. The first class we were instructed to add was for the image. So up here on my image element, I'm going to put a class equals img rounded, and also add the img responsive. Go ahead and go back to design, and let's take a look at that in our browser. So right click on default.aspx and choose view in browser. And you can see that it has rounded the image of our Murac logo. Our next instruction is to add the control label class to all of our HTML label elements. So I'm going to come over to source, and on the label I'm going to add control label, and on my server controls drop down list and text boxes I'm also going to add a class. For the server controls you need to specify CSS class and set that equal to my form control. Go down to the interest rate, and on the label for interest rate, go ahead and add the control label. The text box, add the CSS class, set that equal to form control. Same thing for the text box for years. For the label, I'm going to add the control label, and the text box, the CSS class, will be the form control. For the future value label, for the HTML label, once again it's the control label. However, for the ASP server control label, it specifies to add the class for text info. So space CSS class equals text dash info. And finally, on step number 18, the last instruction, we are down to this part of step number 18, which is to add the button and the button primary class to the button server controls and the text danger class to the validators. So let's go ahead and do that. For the calculate button, add a CSS class equal to btn space and then btn primary. Go ahead and do the same thing for the clear button. CSS class equals button and btn dash primary. Go ahead and scroll back up to the validators, and let's add a class there for the text, CSS class is text dash danger. Go ahead and do that on all 4 validators. CSS class equals text dash danger. So I'm going to do this also for the interest rate validators. CSS class equals text dash danger. And for the range validator for the interest rate, also CSS class equals text dash danger. Go ahead and go back over to the design and you'll be able to see some of the changes that we've made already. I just noticed on the range validator doesn't seem to have the CSS class, and that's because I have an error. I have dash equals danger instead of just dash danger. I'm going to switch back over to design, and then to verify that everything worked correctly, I'm going to right click on the default.aspx and say view in browser. I'm going to bring this back over, and you can see how that has changed the formatting of the controls and the labels on the form. I'm going to click calculate so we can see that the future value label is now formatted with the text for information. I'm going to click clear, and then I can click calculate because I want to check the validators. So the required field validators are also formatted, and if I trigger the range validators, they also are formatted. Okay, everything looks okay, so we have completed the additional formatting and we'll be ready to move on to the next step.